Hello. And this time it's relevant to say hello from Sao Paulo, Brazil. I just got back from people watching, and I don't know how many of you practice that particular art. But those of you who need context, people watching is exactly what it sounds like. I have a couple of places in Sao Paulo, the same way I have in every city I've been to, where there are places I can go and quietly observe. This is one of my favorite hangouts because I can sit high above everyone else by a few feet, offset by glass, and watch people in a few different environments. There are 3 or 4 environments that I can watch while having a snack in that spot. And people watching is something I do kind of quietly, stoically, but not creepily, watching people go by, interact. If you come to Sao Paulo, Brazil, to hang out with me, I'll take you there. I'm not going to give any of my locations up online. I don't need it flooded like those stairs where they filmed the Joker. People watching is a skill I picked up a while back. Places that was most notably useful were places like Brazil, and before this, a few years back in Bangkok, Thailand. When you're able to do people watching and watch people interact with each other patiently, you can really pick up on the subtle cues that make interacting socially easier. You learn, well, one of the most important things you learn, space. How close is too close? How far is too far? For example, Brazil is kind of like Japan. Not as intense as Japan, but people here are very comfortable being very close to you. Hey, how you doing, Unc? Glad to see you. Thanks for popping in. Let me know if you have any questions. But when you're in a place like Brazil, it's important because a lot of the social interaction is subtle. Not to say American social interaction isn't, but in Brazil, so much goes unsaid. It's a place where I can call it the land of the 15-minute hellos and the 15-minute goodbyes. Because when you say, bon descansa, boa noite, boa fin de semana, you can say goodbye for 15 minutes in Brazil. And the whole time you may be holding someone's hands. The whole time you may be hugging someone the entire time. Women especially. How you doing, Rain and Woman? You're welcome to pop up and chat with me if you want to for the duration of this one. The door is always open for you, you know that. And in Brazil, when people get next to each other, I mean, they really get next to each other. So one of the things that I watch is space. When people have regular conversations, how close are they? And you get to the point where you can start to judge relationships by distance, by the casualness of the touch and the interaction, so that when I go out to either do business or hang out socially, I can actually replicate those behaviors and stick out a lot less. Look like a foreigner a lot less. That helps a lot of those social and professional interactions. My ability to be able to say, subconsciously, I know when I shake this man's hand, how long to hold it. These are tiny details, things that help me. Some of you remember my tenure as a financial professional that helped me to find a little bit of financial success to get out of the United States with no debt. Those subtleties are things I mastered in the American context. And while 80% of it travels around the world, it's that last 20% that we really have to focus on. I mean, even the way that men and women interact with each other are drastically different. I mean, by a huge margin. The way that, I've got the video on, but I can listen. All right, well, smooches to you too. And like I said, the door is always open. The way that men and women interact with each other on a social level, drastically different. When you walk into a social situation, you're expected to kiss the right cheek of every woman there. And it's something you do, old, young, hello, hello. And that also changes by city. Sao Paulo is a one-cheek city, whereas I know for certain Rio de Janeiro is a two-smooch city. So considering I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Reigning Woman got it right. It's one smooch. It would be on this side. There's just kind of a touch of the cheek, but tiny things like that make a huge difference. When you go to Rio, it's a two. And one of the things you learn about that interaction is there's a running joke, because the cities of Rio and Sao Paulo are vastly different, and they have a bit of a rivalry that can go pretty deep. I'll have to go into that one day. They say that the people in Sao Paulo only have time to kiss on one cheek because we're too busy earning money, and that because the people in Rio have too much free time on their hands, they can kiss on two cheeks. That's an awful thing to say. It's a part of a rivalry that was established long before I arrived in Brazil. You find that in Brazil, and I don't know if this is indicative of Latin American culture, quite frankly, I've heard mixed reviews of whether or not Brazilians are Latin. That's something I'm going to have to chat with some of my Brazilian friends I'm going to have on about that. Men, much more physical towards each other. As you know, I train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, grappling. It's never uncommon to see a guy who just won a tough fight get hugged and kissed by his coach and his whole team. Because as men, it's just an expression of emotion. And I find that Americans, it's interesting because you never realize how weird Americans are about certain things until you see it in practice and they go, why are they hugging and kissing? Like, they're happy. This dude just nearly got his head torn off in a fight and he came out on top. But then they may see an American basketball game where someone gets pat on the butt, and to them, they're like, that's kind of... So everything is different. There's no right or wrong. It's simply where you are at the time and understanding that. A big thing here in Brazil, women. When women walk together, they tend to walk arm in arm. It's completely common. I don't know the system behind it of whose arm goes in whose, but it's a social system, and you can actually start to see the commonalities, whether it's a younger woman holding an older woman's arm or two women walking down the road. And one of my friends said something to me kind of in a weird homophobic way. He said, those two women gay? I said, well, I don't know. How am I supposed to know that? He said, well, look, they're holding each other's arms. I was like, yeah, but so are those women and those women and those women. And because he had just recently come out of the American matrix, let's call it, for lack of a better word, and we're going to beat a dead horse, he said, that looks strange to him. And I said, well, you look strange to them because you're a foreigner in their country. That's why I stress to people, find a place where you can sit down, maybe buy a sandwich someplace or a coffee, but there are a lot of cafes, there are a lot of places that'll position you on a corner to be able to watch folks go by, watch their interactions. You can start to see social hierarchies. You can start to see with enough time who defers to who in something as simple as, oh, a bus stops by. What's the best way to get on? What's the best way to get off? Sao Paulo, Brazil was the first place on the planet, including my own country, the United States. It was the first place where I saw two old ladies get on the bus, and just as a matter of principle, people got out of the reserved chairs. It didn't matter how long the trip was. Their chairs reserved for the pregnant, the old, the infirm, the blind. And there was one upper teenage kid. He was at the age where young men are extraordinarily dangerous because they are not children, but they don't have the responsibilities of men, but the aggression to do damage. Let's call him 17. And he pretended to be asleep as this gray-haired woman looked at the chair he was in. And it was interesting the way that the situation was handled. The women on the bus started shaming him. One old lady hit him. And he's like, whoa, what are you doing? But it's interesting because there's no way out. If an old lady slaps you and insults you and says you're lazy, whatever she called him, words that shall not be repeated, and everyone's looking at you now, there's no way out of that situation. Which was actually a much more socially skillful way to do it than having you know, me or one of my savage friends saying, hey, get up, that old lady needs the chair, because now he can fight back. But on a bus full of people, some old lady slaps you and says, hey, get out of my chair, I'm an old lady. And it was interesting because he was looked at as being less than. He was looked at as being having no home training, having no manners, of being a young man who must have been raised in the most depraved of places. And he knew it and they knew it. But tiny things like that that you see make societal differences. Now, I'm not here to tell you that my Brazilian experience is going to be your Brazilian experience. But what I am here to tell you is that something that, you know, that stoic philosophy I have, that I'm constantly struggling with, you know, I always say a man's ego is his own worst enemy. And the stoicism that I try to carry into life tells me that my ego needs to be in check and that I need to be quiet more often. I try to get all my words out, maybe on YouTube. I get all my words out in the office, but I try to learn to be silent more than I speak. And one of the places where that really comes in handy is to be able to silently watch people. Not like a ninja, not like a creepy guy, but to be able to silently sit there and observe what's going on around you. Look at how people can look at someone else, because remember, in a lot of countries, we won't recognize as foreigners strange behavior. To them, to us, it could be simply someone weird or different. But when you watch how people react when a particular person walks into the scene, when a particular guy crosses the street, maybe you notice that people kind of go around him and you start looking at him and saying, okay, what is it about this guy that tells everyone who lives in this country, who understands the flow of human traffic, to say, I'm going to give him a wide berth? Because to me, he might just look like a guy with a t-shirt on that I can't read and a hat that I can't read. But those may say things about him socially that I might want to put in check for later. The same with women. I've been in social situations where everybody's dressed up to party, but as we all know, we all have a uniform that we wear. And there are certain uniforms that make people very off-put. There was a woman who I saw walk into a social situation that looked no more or less fashionable than any other woman in the room, but there were some slight variations on her outfit that had a guy tap me on the shoulder and go, nah, we need to go over here because she's working. And I said, in the middle of a downtown blah, 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 he was like, yeah, definitely. And I said, well, how can you tell? He said, well, look at how she's dressed. And then I looked at the waitress and I said, look at how she's dressed. It's the same thing. Look at the lady that just walked in. She's the same thing. He's like, no, it's not the same. But I'm not here to argue with him. I'm here to learn what those subtle differences are that will help me as a humble immigrant to better integrate into the Brazilian society. I'm not telling you this is only going to work in Brazil. I'm telling you this is going to work everywhere. This might be a skill that I need when I go back to the United States to do business, because I've lived outside of the United States most of my adult life traveling. And if I go back there with my, well, let me back up for a second. We all know what time it is. This is something that I like to share with everybody because I'm not a YouTuber. I don't have any contracts with YouTube or Google. And I make it a point all the time to show everyone what I do. I'm an editor, proofreader, resume writer, anything having to do with the English language. I do speech coaching. I work with people who need a book that they wrote, put in university level English. If you have a speech you're going to deliver and you need that sharpened up. If people who simply need their fundamental English skills taken from an average level to a professional English level, a university English level, they hire me for that. One of the things I'm most proud of, and I show everybody this all the time, is if you catch up with me on LinkedIn, and anybody's welcome to join me on LinkedIn, I'm the same person everywhere. I'm who I really am. I want you to scroll to the bottom, and I'd like for you to look at my recommendations. I'd like for you to see what other professionals have said about me so that you feel comfortable saying, hey, I need Wateef, or more importantly, I'm just going to pass this information to somebody else. And that's okay. If you don't need what I do, that's fine. But I will ask everybody to do the same thing. Do the thumbs up and do the subscribe and bell thing, because that's how I get to spread the good word, and that's how I get to meet new people. That's something that I really, really need you to do because, hey, it's free and it helps me to have the the patience and those small little hits of dopamine that keep me sharing the information that's taken me around the world with all of you. As always, if you have any questions, you have anything that you want me to touch on, go ahead and put that at the bottom. I tell everybody that when you share this, make sure you share it on your LinkedIn or your Twitter or your, a big one I tell people is to copy the link, right? Look up, you copy the link to what I do, and I want you to paste it in your Tinder profile. And I'm going to tell you why. What you do is when you match with somebody, you both know you want to fuck. So you don't have to talk about that. But what you can say is, if we can't have a conversation at least as deep as some of the things this guy says about the world, about travel, about Bitcoin, about economics, about the state of the human condition, then really what else do we have? Let me know how that experiment works out for you. I've gotten some good feedback. I've had some great feedback from it. And with that, I just want to give you a few of those things to take with you today. I give away all the good information that I have for free. And I always have, because it always comes back to me. For every word that I say that helps somebody, there's somebody out there that comes back to me and says, hey, I'd like to hire you professionally. For every free piece of information that I give someone, it comes back to me and, hey, I have a referral for you. And I want to say thank you, because this whole YouTube thing is propping up to be a great adventure. I've been doing it seriously for a little while now, and I'm having fun with this hodgepodge of life experience that I get to share. So make sure you click subscribe and the bell, click subscribe and the bell and the thumbs up. I always forget to say that. And with that, I want to tell everybody, hey, I love you, and